When I think about my life in music and the experiences that have shaped me the most musically, they were all experiences that actually all of you probably had. I'm sure you can remember those incredible moments when a musical performance moved you and inspired you so much that you never forgot it. Well, it was exactly these moments of profound inspiration that led to so many doors opening for me into the extraordinary inner world of making music. But this brought up an interesting question. All of these great musicians who inspired me so much, what was it they possessed that gave them the power to create this unique experience? What was it? Was it technique, knowledge, style? How was it exactly they brought so much life to the music they played? Well, this set me off on a long investigation to try and understand better what the common thread is between these great musicians. What's different about them that makes them stand out? And the word that I finally realized said it all is musicality. Through all of my years in the music business, whether in Los Angeles, Europe, or wherever I've lived, what every great musician I've known has in common is a high level of musicality. Now, everyone knows the word, but the meaning is often unclear because it represents qualities that are very subtle and difficult to define. And yet somehow, most people understand that saying someone is really musical means they have a special kind of intuitive understanding of music. But because technique and theory are something we can define easily, that's what most music curriculums focus on. But this leaves out a critical part of what actually makes great musicians unique. And we're not talking about something radical or far-fetched. This is something that people at the top of many other professions also have in common. Whether it's the arts, technology, sports, or even business, what I'm talking about is highly developed instincts and how this makes it possible for these top performers to feel their way through complex situations and come up with ideas, actions, and solutions that are always a step ahead of almost everyone else. We're all born instinctive beings, but somewhere along the way, we lose that original connection when we're taught to fear making mistakes and to just follow the program. These people have managed to avoid this trap and live in that free, open space where inspiration and instinct work hand in hand with each other, where mistakes are just feedback on the way to innovation. Now, to put this in more concrete terms for musicality, I've come up with what to me are the three major, let's say, food groups of musicality. They aren't the only things, but these to me are the three major pillars of what it really means to be musical. They are 1. Deep ear skills, 2. Timing, feel, groove, and 3. Feeling/emotion. First off, deep ear skills. Not to be confused with standard ear training, which focuses mostly on being able to identify what you're hearing, like, that's a perfect fifth, or that's a subdominant chord. Deep ear skills operate on a much deeper level than just defining intervals or chords. It involves a much more intuitive understanding of how sounds relate to each other in the act of making music in real time. So these musicians are able to navigate their way through music using only their ears. How is that possible? Because they've literally exercised their ears so much, especially in live playing situations where they had nothing else to follow, that it's become completely natural for them to trust their ears to guide them. Now, if that sounds a little like science fiction, think about this. Every single one of you has done this exact thing on a master level. Any idea when? When you learned your native language. Think about it. Did any of you as babies ever study grammar or vocabulary? Right, nobody did. And yet you learned how to use all of the standard grammar and vocabulary of your native language using only what? Your ears. You never had to stop and think, oh, that's the imperfect past conditional tense. No, it was all just sounds that through your ears, your brain organized for you in a totally organic way. Musicians with deep ear skills simply use that same self-organizing system in our brains with music. Second, timing, feel, groove. This one is the most difficult to define, which is why I'm using 3 different terms to describe it. To put it simply, it's the way very good musicians use extremely small variations in the timing of their playing to create the best feel in the music. To understand this concept, you first have to recognize that a note is not a precise point, but rather a space. Yes, a very tiny space, but still a space. And whether you play towards the back of, the middle of, or the front of that space can completely change the feeling in the music. Great field players, or groove players, have developed a very instinctive feeling for this space and seem to always find the sweet spot to put the notes so that the music always has a very special feel to it. Even in a highly structured written medium like classical music, this same principle applies. Why else do some classical artists become famous for playing a certain composer's music? For instance, like Rubinstein with Chopin. What made him stand out from all the other brilliant classical pianists who played and recorded the same very precisely written out music? It was how he played in those subtle, small spaces. It was the intricate little nuances that flowed from his fingers into Chopin's notes that no one else could match. In every style of music, you have these musicians whose unique sense of timing in those tiny spaces creates such a recognizable sound that they become known for it. It's something that can't be measured or written down, and yet its power can't be denied. It's what I like to call the music beyond the notes. And last but certainly not least, feeling and/or emotion. This one might seem kind of obvious, but I'm always a little surprised by how many young musicians struggle to find that connection to authentic emotion in their playing or singing. Of course, it doesn't help that there's so much more focus on technique in music than ever before. And music education too often uses a more mechanical approach to teaching music, without creating a space for students to develop this critical connection to their emotions when they play or sing. But music is a language of feeling. It's how we all connect to it. No one listens to music if it doesn't make them feel anything. And it's always the artists whose music is so rich with their own personal feeling who connect to us in the deepest way. So you can have average technique, a lot of great artists do, but you can't have average feeling. You need to connect to that place where the feeling lives. So it comes down to this. When you have deep ear skills, great feel, timing, groove, and great feeling and emotion in your playing or singing, first off, the music sounds the best that it can. Secondly, it adds so much richness to the experience of playing music, and it connects much more deeply to the audience. And last, quite simply, more people want to work with you. But really, how hard is that to understand? If you have a musician with great ears, great timing, and great feeling, these are the musicians everyone wants on their team. So the big question remains, how do you work on this? And in truth, there is no formula. But for me, the biggest clue comes again from how we learned our native language. This is why I often refer to this work as learning music as a native language. Neuroscientists know now that music and language are processed in many of the same areas of the brain. So it makes perfect sense that the intuitive way our brain self-organizes information for our native language can work the same for music. And it already does, especially in so many cultures around the world where music is often a deep part of their daily lives and is learned in the same organic way that we all learn our native language. Music is as old as language too, possibly even older. Flutes made from bone discovered in 2009 were dated back to 40,000 years ago, showing how deep in our systems as humans music is. But even though we're talking about instincts, like muscles, they don't develop and get strong unless you use and challenge them regularly. This is the problem if you're only practicing scales, memorizing exercises, and studying theory. You're not touching these instinctive skills that musicality is made of, and you're not exercising those muscles. We're all great at exercising those muscles as small children because we start out with a different learning pattern, which is doing becoming what you know. But in school, that changes into knowing becoming what you do. But the reason that first pattern is so powerful is because in the process of doing, we're using and developing our instincts. So the knowledge we create is on a much more deeply internalized, instinctive level, like our native language. And this is the place where musicality comes from. So what role does discipline play in all this? Well, to be honest with you, I had very little discipline when I was starting out, and I'm only slightly better now. But what I did have a massive amount of then and now is passion. It's what drove me to spend literally thousands of hours working on these skills without even really knowing it was what I was doing. I only knew I was doing something I loved and that I totally lost track of time when I was doing it. So no, not because of discipline, but because I was consumed with the fire of inspiration and all of the incredible possibilities that music presented to me. Plutarch said about 2,000 years ago, "A mind is a fire to be ignited, not a container to be filled." Igniting your passion is connecting to the most powerful source for developing your musicality. And the biggest motivation to become more musical and more successful is not because of money or how cool you'll look, but because of the opportunities to make more music in more places with more inspiring people and to touch audiences and to move them in the ways that only music can, especially when you give your musicality the room to really develop. What a truly amazing gift to have a chance to do that. So why not start that journey now?